Better Than Art by Killbles. Blackmail. What's that? The image captured speed, heroism, skill, everything a Wonderbolt should aspire to. The lines and curves were well defined. He particularly enjoyed the crisp, well-chiseled jaw that the artist had given him. But one thing was wrong. Still trying to figure out why Madame Machin drew your penis, a voice undoubtedly belonging to one of Soarin's teammates said, her voice badly concealing her amusement. Maybe she's trying to tell you something. Soarin straightened his tie in an attempt to look dignified. He turned his head slightly so he could give the flower-white pony standing beside him a withering look. Thank you for your insight, Surprise. As always, I find it incredibly invaluable. You're welcome, Surprise sang, immune to sarcasm as she always was. She stood by Soarin's side and examined the painting herself. After a moment's consideration, she cocked her head on the side. I thought it would have been bigger, she said in a carefree manner. You know what, Surprise? I finally remember why I took the billet as the leader for the Team 5 in Manhattan, Soarin said scathingly. He tore himself away from the painting and picked another completely random artwork in the gallery to admire. Why? Surprise asked lamely, following him like a loyal hound. Because you weren't there, Soarin answered bluntly, his distaste most palpable. And that's awful. Think of all the time that I missed out hanging with you. But now you're back, we can be best buddies again. We can go to openings like this one, performing shows together, pull pranks on Spitfire again, look at paintings with your peen. Soarin held up a hoof to forestall her, and she fell silent immediately. He looked around at the other guests with a weak smile. Several were already regarding both him and Surprise with a mixture of confusion and disgust. He quickly moved away before they started muttering. Spitfire didn't pick you to be here, did she? Soarin asked, fearing he knew the answer already. Surprise gave him a wide grin. Well, she originally chose Fleetfoot as your number 2, but I made sure she was disposed of for the evening, Surprise said, without a trace of remorse. I've never seen any pony react quite as suddenly to those laxatives. I should report you, Soarin chided her. But you're not going to, Surprise said, examining another painting that depicted the Wonderbolts of Team 1 fighting a dragon that would have been larger than the exhibit hall. Soarin felt a small smile creep onto his face. No, I'm not. Frankly, Fleetfoot is a grumpy farm-hand-loving, salmon-addicted, self-obsessed git. You're much better company than she would be. Oh, so she's just like you, Surprise said idly. Is that why you slept with her? Soarin blinked quickly. I don't know what you're talking about. Naturally. Soarin fell silent for a moment. I think I like this painting more, he said finally, steering the conversation in a much safer direction. Yes, the exclusion of you and your undersized phallus makes the painting much more intolerable in general. Surprise agreed, making Soarin scoff quietly. Despite a constant borderline insubordination and blatant disregard for military protocol, Surprise was a fantastic flyer, and it was widely believed amongst the Wonderbolts that was the only reason Spitfire hadn't discharged her yet. That or Surprise had some dirt in her that Spitfire didn't want public. Knowing the mayor next to him, Soarin was inclined to believe both. Soarin, you reckon if I added a stick figure of you into this, any pony would notice? Don't even think about it, Soarin snapped. We're here to generate goodwill, not cause mischief. Surprise pouted, but slid the pen she had procured back into her jacket pocket. Infinite mischief, Soarin thought, with a trace of amusement, guiding Surprise away from the painting before she got bored and drew him in anyway. They had barely reached the next painting when the unnecessarily wide doors at the end of the exhibition hall had swung open, and an armoured herald announced, "Presenting your Princess Twilight Sparkle!" "Oh boy, more upper-class twits," Surprise said dully, as the majority of the room seemed to scabble towards the door. The chance to acquit oneself with a princess being too good for any noble to ignore. At least they won't bother me anymore. Show some respect, Soarin said, looking casually at the small party being mobbed by the entrance. She saved Equestria more. The words died in his throat as he recognised one of her party members. Quick, hide me! Ew. Surprise said saucily, following Soarin's gaze and spotting the reason her teammate had started trying to hide behind her. Some pony you slept with? No, Soarin said defensively. Why do you seem to think I sleep with anything that moves? Well, with the number of false support cases that cross your desk. For the record, I've yet to find a legitimate one, Soarin interrupted, ducking behind Surprise as the princess's party moved past them. Well, it gives the impression that you slept around more times than Genghis Khan. Who? Soarin asked, extracting himself from behind her. Not important, Surprise said dismissively. Who is she, anyway? I don't have to tell you, and I'm not going to tell you. That's my own business, Soarin said, straightening his tie again. Surprise frowned. Well, this story doesn't go anywhere if you don't tell, so you may as well get started. Soarin ignored her strange remark. Mind your own business. How about you tell me, or I might accidentally let slip to Spitfire that you slept with a teammate. You wouldn't dare, Soarin growled. You've had your fair share, if I remember correctly. That broom cupboard incident with you and Wave Chill, or are you still claiming that was a broom? Surprised to her credit, looked unfazed. Spitfire is still cross about what happened to her peace lily. I could tell her you dropped it off the third-floor balcony. Soarin bit his lip in annoyance. That's blackmail! Surprise smiled innocently. Oh, is it? I didn't realise, she continued smiling, knowing she finally backed Soarin into a corner. Her name is Rainbow Dash, and I hate you, by the way. Yeah, get on with it. The name sounds familiar. You probably heard Spitfire throw it around. Probably with isn't on the team yet. Why not? Stuck on the end. She's one of the best flyers I know. And the best being myself, obviously. Do you like to get off by overinflating your ego? Surprise asked with an over-the-top eye roll. So, how did you meet this mare anyway? And why did you hide from her? Soarin glared at her. It was a story he'd rather not tell Surprise, regardless of what she threatened to do. Clock is ticking, Soarin! Soarin finally relented, deciding that Spitfire's wrath was worse than whatever Surprise could do with this story. We first met back when I was in the lower Cloudsdale Flight Academy. Soarin stared out the classroom window, bored. The words of his teacher, Mr. Elm, washed over him as the aging stallion droned on about how the alliance between the Griffin Kingdoms and Equestria had been formed. Something useless and uninteresting. Soarin thought as he quickly scanned the classroom discovering that most of his fellow students were just as brain dead, if not more so than he was. Please, let something interesting happen. I might fall into a coma, Soarin thought, looking outside enviously at the senior class playing a game on the outer flight field. As if responding to his plea, a quick trio of knocks rang out on the door. Mr. Elms ignored it at first until the knocks came again. An annoyed look crossed the aged stallion's features as he pulled the door open roughly to reveal a young mare. Her mane was windswept and unkempt, and by the look on her face, her flushed cheeks, it looked as if she had just been arguing with some pony. She wordlessly thrust a scrap of paper towards Mr. Elm. Most interesting to the class was her mane, which ran down the back of her neck, in almost all colours of the rainbow. Soarin had never seen anything like it before. I see. Take a seat at the back. You have work to do, I trust, Mr. Elm said dully. She nodded crossly. Good. Now don't disturb my class any further. Thank you, he said, waving her away and launching back into his triads. A few heads turned discreetly to follow the mare, but most of the class energy seemed sapped by their teacher's lecture. Silent, she shuffled to the back of the class and drew up a seat next to Soarin. He continued to stare at her, struck by her rough yet attractive appearance. If he had more eyes, he was sure he'd find most of the boys in the class were paying more attention to her than the teacher. Mr. Elm's lecture continued, but Soarin wasn't paying attention. The mare next to him had him hook, line and sinker, and she didn't know he existed yet. Hi, Soarin whispered nervously. Her glare flickered to him before returning to her book silently. I'm Soarin. What's your name? Soarin pressed. She grunted something under her breath. Soarin sighed quietly and resumed staring out the window, whatever futile chance he had at not being bored for the next hour slipping through his hooves. "Rainbow Dash," he heard. Turning his head slowly, he found her staring at him. Soarin was surprised by the voice that came out of her mouth. It didn't seem quite right, almost too much like a boy's. He quickly checked to make sure Mr. Elm was engrossed in his speech before turning back to her. "What are you here for?" I hit some pony. I nearly broke his nose. He called me a lesbian," she muttered under her breath, ruefully. Soarin decided pointing out that she sounded like a boy was unwise. "Cool." He trailed off. "What's with your... My voice," she guessed crossly. "Your mane," Soarin corrected quickly, not wanting to be her second victim of the day. She shrugged. "Dunno. It's always been this way." Soarin shrugged and flashed a cruel smile at a brown stallion a few chairs away. The stallion crushed a note he had been writing and looked away defeated. "How come I haven't seen you around here before?" Soarin asked, turning back to Rainbow Dash. "I was at Rest Point until about a week ago. Still fairly new here." Soarin's jaw dropped. "You were at Rest Point? What made you come to this shithouse?" She shrugged nonchalantly. "Got kicked out. Apparently the dean doesn't like it when I beat the entire track team and then beat up the captain to a pulp." "What did he do?" She shrugged again. "He asked me out." Soarin snorted loudly, attracting the attention of the class along with Mr. Elms. The wizened pony started at him for a moment with contempt. "Soarin, contain yourself, please." He trailed off as he noticed Rainbow Dash next to him. "You move," he ordered, pointing at an empty desk behind Soarin. "Now, where was I?" "Talking me into a coma," Soarin muttered under his breath. "And then?" Surprise asked impatiently. "Well, that's it. She left after class finished, and I didn't see her again for a week or so. Guess she had some sort of internal suspension." "And then?" Soarin fixed an eye on her. "You're needy." "I'm curious. Sue me." Soarin stared at her. "I'm considering it." Surprise impatiently gestured for him to continue. Soarin left her in suspense, admiring another piece of art showing the Wonderbolts assembled in the Cloudsdale. I eventually sought her out in the cafeteria. We had some friendly-ish conversations, mostly from me. I think she just tolerated me because no one else would talk to her. Even so, I had my own friends, and she was just this mare I started having a crush on, and despite what you might think, she was totally out of my league, at least at the time. "You had friends? I thought you were just cranky old hermit," Surprise interjected. "Thank you, Surprise. I'll remember that next comment time I have to roaster lecturing duty," Soarin said dryly. "Anyway, in our conversation, we discovered each other's passion for flight. Naturally, we became very competitive on the track, when I had spare time." Soarin gave a small mischievous smile, which ended up being quite a lot. "And I win again!" Rainbow Dash boasted proudly as Soarin buzzed over the finish line. He was a full 15 seconds behind her. How embarrassing, he thought as he touched down. "Not really much of a surprise, but I thought the idea was to get faster, not slower, Soarin. Your run on the obstacle course before lunch would like some words with you," Soarin muttered, trying to claw back some dignity. In straight line speed, Rainbow Dash blew Soarin out of the water, but despite her lighter build, Soarin was more skilled at aerobatics. "Bah, you're just jealous," Rainbow Dash said dismissively. She gave Soarin a friendly punch on the shoulder. The near daily exercise sessions had toughened Soarin considerably. Steely bands of muscle had started to appear under his coat, and his constantly windswept look gave him a rough, handsome appearance that had made him rather popular with the female student body. Not to mention a fair few of the stallions as well, if you know what I mean. If Rainbow Dash had noticed his change in appearance over the last few months, she hadn't commented, rather keeping her mind focused on not getting in trouble and flying faster than any pony else. For what felt like the 100th time since he had started growing fond of her, Soarin briefly wondered if she even liked stallions. Soarin grunted and pretended to be examining in the leaderboards posted on the bottom of the grandstand. Much to his horror, Rainbow Dash had already topped most of the events, and in the case of the 500-metre dash, smashed the record by almost an entire 5 seconds. "Admiring my greatness?" she asked, stepping next to him, and looking at the posted times with a wide grin. "I'm not looking the right way to be admiring your greatness," Soarin said, the words out of his mouth before he could think. He didn't have time to even raise a hoof to defend himself before Rainbow Dash pummeled him to the ground with 2 quick strikes. "Ow!" Soarin wheezed. It felt like she cracked one of his ribs. "I thought you were better than that," Rainbow Dash snapped, marching off indignantly to the shower rooms. She tossed Soarin another dirty look before vanishing inside. Soarin, you all right?" A voice that Soarin's spinning head vaguely recognised as belonging to his friend Lightning Streak asked with concern. Fine," Soarin wheezed painfully, gladly accepting a helping hoof from his friend. "She just floored you. What did you do?" "I flirted with her. Accidentally." Lightning Streak snorted in amusement and looked towards the showers. "That's so hot." "You have misguided sense of what is hot, my friend." Whatever. Let's just get you to the nurse. You look like rubbish." Turns out she fractured a rib. It was quite painful to fly with. No unicorns up in Cloudsdale to give me a quick fix, as you might imagine. Lightning Streak, you mean as in the Wonderbolt? Surprise asked, tapping her chin thoughtfully. Soarin nodded. Yeah, we graduated together. We were good friends in the academy, but drifted apart when he moved to Las Pegasus. Surprise shrugged and played with a lock of her mane. So, you hid from her tonight because she beat you up ages ago? She asked slowly, piecing together bits of the story. Sweet Celestia, no. Soarin laughed. If I can face Dragon without wetting my flight suit, I'm sure I can stand you to a single mare, even one as formidable as her. Surprise frowned deeply. Then why did you hide like a Nancy Pansy? You know I don't like being called a Nancy Pansy. Don't call me a Nancy Pansy. Surprise leaned in closer to Soarin's ear. Nancy Pansy, she whispered in a voice Soarin would have imagined more suitable for the bedroom. Soarin had a sudden urge for a cold shower as Surprise stepped back from Do that again, and I'll have you court-martialed for harassment. So what happened then? Surprise asked, completely ignoring Soarin's threat. Soarin glared at her mutinously, the unassuming and innocent look on Surprise's face not exactly helping with his composure. He glared silently at her. Come on, Soarin, this is an interesting story, Surprise complained. Soarin remained impassive. All right, I'm sorry I called you a Nancy Pansy, Surprise said quietly. It won't happen again, sir. Thank you, Soarin said simply. Apology accepted. Surprise brightened slightly, and her infamously large smile returned. So? She asked. Well, the next week was awkward to say the least. The cafeteria was buzzing with activity. Students darted from table to table and yelled and caused general ruckus that several hundred students in the same room created. Soarin dodged a speeding yellow blur, grimacing with discomfort as his leg brushed against his recently bandaged chest. Nearly an entire week had passed since she had punched him, and the two hadn't shared a word. She ignored him completely during the few classes they shared, and Soarin hadn't even bothered trying to catch her in the air. Hey, Soarin, over here! Soarin turned to see a small knot of ponies clustered around the ends of the table. His friends waved him over and gestured for him to join them. Feel better? A little. Soarin admitted, not taking the preferred seat. You going to sit down? No. I've got something to sort out with some pony, he said, sharing a quick look with Lightning Streak. Ooh, you're going to see your girlfriend. A few friendly jeers answered this comment. She's not my girlfriend, Soarin snapped back immediately. Sure. You just spend every day with Rainbow Dash practicing. She's one of the hottest mares in the academy. You expect us to believe you don't want to play around with her? Soarin made a disgusted sound deep in his throat and spun on the spot, marching away from his friends before they could heckle him more. I'm not interested in Rainbow Dash. Wait, who am I kidding? Of course I am. he thought sourly. Ever since he had first seen her, he had been enthralled by her beauty, and after talking with her, he had appreciated her tough, no-nonsense personality. It had taken all his courage to talk to her the first time, but now that he was apparently so self-confident that he was subconsciously flirting with her, it was disappointing to see her rebuke him so aggressively. Heck, maybe she is a lesbian, Soarin thought glumly as he searched the crowded cafeteria for her. Eventually, he spotted her in the far corner, alone, save for a few hopeful, yet naive onlookers. Trying to ignore his nervousness, Soarin slowly sat down opposite her. Her eyes shot up and locked with his for a moment before flickering away. "I didn't tell the nurse you did it," Soarin said, breaking the awkward long silence between them. A flicker of relief crossed her features before the expressionless veil fell again. "Rainbow Dash," Soarin said, "I'm sorry." She bit her lip and looked down at her food. Soarin felt a surge of anger rise up. "Look, you stubborn, pig-headed, arrogant, lice-ridden, baboon-bottom buffoon. I'm just trying to sort things out between us. You're my friend, and you might not like to admit it, but I'm yours as well. I made a mistake, a stupid, careless mistake, and you're treating it like I brought up the Holocaust or something. I'm trying to apologise, trying to set things straight so that we can both get on with our lives, with or without each other. So please don't just sit there in silence ignoring me while I'm sticking my neck out trying to make things right." He fumed. A few painful seconds passed and Soarin started to wonder if he was in for another beating. "You're right," she said finally. Soarin breathed a sigh of relief. "So you're not going to break another one of my ribs?" She shook her head. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I'm sorry." Soarin felt as if the weight had been taken off his chest. She didn't hate him. What was that all about anyway? I make one little comment and you completely lose it. "I thought you were going to become one of them," Rainbow said, the usual edge in her voice gone. She shot a dark look at a few stallions sitting a few tables away. "As sad as this sounds, Soarin, you're the only friend I have here. And when you know, flirted with you," Soarin added helpfully. "Yes, whatever. Anyway, I panicked. I wasn't ready for that. Not from you, at least." "What's that supposed to mean?" Soarin asked, slightly offended. "What I mean to say is that you're different. You're the only guy I've ever met who hasn't just taken me for either a lesbian or a toy or a combination of both. You treat me like a friend." "I see," Soarin said bitterly. "Doesn't mean you have to go hit any pony." That's something else. Don't tell any pony else, okay?" Rainbow admitted, slumping over the table. Soarin raised his eyebrows in surprise. She had never confided anything in him before. "Remember when I told you about how I got kicked out of Rest Point?" "Yeah?" Rainbow looked around shiftily. "That wasn't entirely true." "You didn't go to Rest Point?" Soarin guessed. "I did. Just the captain of the track team kind of had a thing for me. He followed me everywhere, harassed me endlessly. I eventually reported him for sexual harassment. When he found out, he tried to have his way with me. He wasn't as tough as he made himself out to be, and I beat him to a pulp. I had him begging for mercy." A flash of dark humour crossed her face. "Unfortunately, the dean at Rest Point turned out to be his dad, and he didn't see it that way. The whole thing got covered up, and I got kicked out for sending his son to hospital." "And you thought I was going to become that?" Soarin asked, horrified. Rainbow Dash grinned sheepishly. "Maybe. You have some serious trust issues." "Are we cool then?" she asked, brushing off his criticism. "I guess so," Soarin said cheerfully. "So, what now?" He grinned cheekily. "Can I flirt with you again?" Surprise giggled quickly. "So subtle, Soarin. Seriously, that's the best you could think of?" She managed between fits of quiet mirth. "Well, I got much better at it, didn't I?" Soarin countered. "Yes, too good, one would say. Now you can't keep the mares off you," Surprise noted as a mare trotted past, giving Soarin a suggestive wink. The lines on Soarin's face deepened, and he suddenly looked many years older. No, I can't," he said sadly. Surprise looked around as if to look for the real Soarin. Soarin, what are you saying? You've been a bit of a tail chaser since, well, as long as I've been on the team. Soarin shook his head wearily. Personally, I like to keep it to a minimum. The number of them that approach me, though, he sighed, and considered his words carefully, makes it somewhat difficult to resist. He turned back to look at Surprise. How many of them do you think want me for the flight suit, or what's in the flight suit? Speaking for mayors everywhere, I think it's rather the contents, Surprise answered dryly. Soarin blinked and shook his head in disapproval. You liked her, didn't you? Surprise asked. I thought that was fairly obvious when I told you, Soarin said. Surprise knitted her brows together. You told me? I just keep getting these weird flashbacks. Soarin sighed in expiration. If you're just going to be stupid, forget it, he muttered sourly. Surprise let out a tiny squeak. No, please go on. She pawed the ground. It's a very interesting story that you blackmailed me into telling, Soarin reminded her sternly. Surprise grinned meekly, for once cowed by her superior officer. Sorry. Soarin grunted and straightened his tie again. Don't do it again. So, you liked her? Soarin nodded. She was special to me. Despite our rivalry at the academy, she treated me like I was her best friend. As a Wonderbolt, she treats me as a real pony, not just some object to cuddle up to for status. Surprise looked at a large painting on the wall that depicted a stern-looking Spitfire hanging on the opposite wall. Did you ever tell her that you liked her? Soarin's face fell. I like to think she knew. I did eventually tell her, but the timing. He shook his head. Surprise lay her head on the table they had found. Did she say she liked you back? Did you ever get together? Soarin allowed a small smile to grace his features. For a brief moment, in what was otherwise one of the worst years for me emotionally, there was one bright spark. Just one. Surprise face fell. So, I'm not going to get a happy ending? Not from me. No. Soarin said with a tiny chuckle. Do you still want to hear it? Does it mean we have to get another flashback? Surprise asked. Oh, what? Soarin asked, the smile falling off his face. I'm telling you, it's just me. He placed a hoof on his chest. Telling you. He pointed the aforementioned hoof at her. Right, of course, Surprise said. What was I thinking? I don't even want to know, Soarin interjected. Anyway, it was senior year. We'd known each other for a couple of years when she gave the first sign that she liked me. Well, more than just a track buddy rival thing at any rate. And I win, yet again! Yeah, Soarin muttered. I was only a tenth of a second slower than you, though. I was giving you a chance. 2 years and you still haven't beaten me in a race. 2 years and you still haven't beaten me on the obstacle course, he rebutted. I'm the fastest stallion on campus, by a long shot. Well, Rainbow Dash said, drawing uncomfortably close, I'm still faster than you. Her breath washed over Soarin, setting his senses alight. She's more playful than usual over the last few weeks, bumping into him, brushing her wings against his, and on one occasion licking his cheek when he stole some of her lunch. All of Soarin's friends, bar one Lightning Streak, had dropped out of Advanced Flight Academy, leaving him few social options besides the thick-headed mare beside him. Bit close, Dashy, Soarin joked, knowing the use of her pet name would annoy her. She gave him a soft glare in response and drew away to a more sociable distance. How are you going with your classes? Soarin asked her casually. She shrugged. Fine, I guess. We're going to hit the showers or sit around and talk all day. She wrinkled up her nose dramatically. You smell worse than a timber wolf stuck in a swamp. What? Soarin asked, absently making his way towards the showers. Imagine a wolf bigger and made of wood, lots of fangs, and has a taste for equine. Sounds scary. Can it fly? Only if you hit one hard enough. Soarin chuckled. Have you had your careers counselling yet? Yeah. Boring. I already know what I want to do. She struck a dramatic pose. Be a Wonderbolt! Well, you do have a knack for flying, I'll give you that. Soarin admitted, but really the entry level for the Wonderbolt Academy is very high. The counsellor was going over it with me. They wanted more than just a set of good wings. They only take a few of the candidates on for further training each year. After that, you have to enlist, go to officer cadet school, graduate being in active service for at least another year, upon which they'll finally take you back for another 2 rounds of screening. Only the brightest and best get through. Well, you're looking at the brightest and best, Rainbow flaunted. Quite, Soarin said, looking up and down, slowly before walking towards the shower blocks. Soarin? Yes? Soarin asked, turning back around to face her. The senior formal is another few weeks away. Not really. I don't really care about that sort of stupid stuff, but, Soarin asked, trying to sound casual. Don't suppose you've thought about who you'll be taking? She asked, shuffling her hooves. Not that I really care. Haven't really thought about it, to be honest, Soarin lied. Suppose you've been hounded by almost every pony, right? She laughed nervously. My dorm is positively full of invitations, Soarin said. Lightning Streak is complaining that he needs more space for his books. I mean, she scratched the back of her head nervously. I don't suppose... Actually, never mind. It was stupid anyway. Rainbow Dash, Soarin said bemusedly. Are you terrified of asking me to the formal? No, she snapped, blushing furiously. Maybe. I'd love to go with you, Soarin said. You know I like you. You mean just as friends, right? She asked quickly. Just as friends, Soarin echoed, pretending that he didn't feel a little deflated. Thank you, Soarin, she said with a nervous smile. Better go have that shower now. Soarin blinked. Now that I think of it, how'd you get into the Wonderbolts? You're certainly neither bright nor the best. I can be brilliant when I want to be, Surprise said casually. I just choose not to be. Soarin shrugged. Suppose. So she asked you to your senior formal. That was the highlight of the year. Well, technically I asked her, Soarin pointed out. She couldn't even get it out. But yes, that was one of the highlights. Surprise looked at him and shook her head slowly. You are a sad, sad pony, and you have my sympathy. I don't want it. Well, you have it. How bad was the rest of the year if the high point was being asked to go to the formal? Soarin shrugged. The formal itself was fine, I guess. We talked, we ate, and we danced, very awkwardly. Just one thing went wrong. One thing. I finally told her I liked her. I mean, for real, it just came out, and I was just so damn nervous. Don't say it, Surprise said preemptively. Apparently, I was a rival, her special friend. I never felt more stupid, Soarin said bitterly. I was naive enough to believe I'd actually get a straight response out of her. I left early, slipped out when she was in the bathroom or something. I was really hoping you wouldn't say that, Surprise said. Can't get much worse than that, right? Mare you liked for a few years just says that you're that one friend? Soarin rubbed his eyes. It gets worse. A week, Soarin thought. How can it be only a week since I screwed up? He rolled over on his bunk and stared at the ceiling blankly. The cramped dorm he shared with Lightning Streak was still stacked full of revision notes and discarded textbooks, even though their exams had passed some weeks earlier. Soarin's roommate was in his bunk below him, head lost in some fantasy novel series. His eyes shifted to the posters of the Wonderbolts he had hung above his bed and silently wondered how his application had gone. The thought of the Wonderbolts brought Rainbow Dash back to the forefront of his mind. No, get out of my head. She doesn't care about you. Just forget about her, he thought glumly, unsuccessfully trying to push his thoughts of her from his mind. Please stop tossing and turning. You're ruining my concentration, Lightning Streak said dryly. Sorry, Soarin muttered. A long silence followed a page being turned and the occasional gust of wind only sounds. All right, that's it, Lightning Streak yelled abruptly, throwing his precious book against the wall and flying up to Soarin. What do I do now? This moping. I've never seen you more depressed, he snapped. Now, would you like to tell me what's wrong? His voice dropped. Please? I don't want to talk about it, Soarin said, rolling over again. Now listen here, Lightstreak started, before being interrupted by a series of rapid knocks on the door. He scowled fiercely at Soarin again, before sailing down to the door and opening it. Soarin didn't bother listening to the short conversation, and the first sign that his roommate had finished was Lightstreak slapping him on the back of the head. Hey, get up! Mail for you. Don't want it, Soarin said. You might. It's from the Wonderbolt Academy. Soarin sat bolt upright, banging his head on the low ceiling, and took the preferred letter with a grimace. Clever, Lightstreak said, ripping open a similar letter. You don't suppose they've taken up the both of us? Soarin said, Rainbow Dash's rejection momentarily forgotten. I made the cut, Lightstreak cheered, turning the letter over to show Soarin. What about you? It is my pleasure to inform you that you have been accepted into the Wonderbolt's Advanced Flight Academy, Soarin said, his jaw dropping in surprise. He never imagined they'd accept him, never in a million years. The news that both he and Lightstreak had qualified was the best thing he had heard all week. Their celebration was cut short by another knock on the door.